The key scraped against the lock of 1421 Daisy Avenue, and Socorro felt a flutter of excitement as the door swung open. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating hardwood floors that gleamed like honey. Tony carried in another box while 5-year-old Tony Jr. raced through the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing off the plaster walls. Outside, a car radio idled somewhere down the block, playing something with a lot of horns in it, and the air smelled like cut grass and the ocean, close enough in Long Beach that you could always catch a little of it if the wind turned right. "Can you believe this place?" Tony said, setting down a box marked kitchen. 3 bedrooms, that big backyard, and the rent? "I know," Socorro said, running her hand along the smooth archway between the living room and dining room. The house had good bones, built solid in the 1940s with thick walls and craftsmanship you didn't see anymore. The Spanish-style exterior with its red tile roof fit perfectly among the neighborhood's mix of stucco homes and craftsman bungalows. Every lawn was trimmed, every hedge neat. It was exactly what she'd dreamed of back when she left Mexico to marry Tony, a safe, quiet place to raise their family. They spent the weekend unpacking, and by Monday morning, the house was beginning to feel like home. Tony kissed her goodbye and headed to work, his lunch bag in hand. Socorro walked Tony Jr. to the corner where the school bus would pick him up, then returned to tackle the remaining boxes. By 11 o'clock, she'd made good progress in the kitchen. She was standing on a step stool, arranging dishes in the cupboard, when movement caught her eye through the window. A woman stood on the front walkway, perfectly still, facing the house. Socorro climbed down and wiped her hands on her apron. Finally, a neighbor. She'd been hoping to meet someone, maybe find another young mother on the street. She hurried to the front door and stepped outside. The woman looked to be in her late 60s, maybe 70, with silver hair pinned back in a neat bun. She wore a simple floral dress, the kind Socorro's own mother favors, and sensible brown shoes. Despite her age, she stood straight and dignified. The late morning sun sat high enough to throw a shadow off every fence post and mailbox on the street, and Socorro noticed, without quite knowing why she noticed, that the woman didn't cast one. "Hello," Socorro called out, smiling as she approached. "I'm Socorro. We just moved in." The woman's face brightened. "Oh, I know. I saw all the commotion this weekend, boxes going in and out, and a little one running circles in the yard. It did my heart good to see it." Her voice was soft but clear, tinged with an accent that Socorro recognized immediately. "You're from Mexico," Socorro said, and switched to Spanish without thinking twice about it. Something in her chest eased. 6 years in America and English still tripped her up more than she liked to admit, especially on days like this one, tired and surrounded by boxes, when she didn't have the patience to hunt for the right words. It felt like a small gift, having someone to talk to in her own language. "Sí, de Jalisco," the woman said, easing into Spanish just as naturally. "Cerca de Guadalajara." Her eyes crinkled with warmth. "Y usted?" "Tepic," Socorro said. "Near the coast, in Nayarit. I came here 6 years ago to marry my husband. Tony Jr. came along the year after." They fell into easy conversation, the kind that happens when 2 people discover unexpected common ground. "My husband and I bought this house right after the war," the woman said, resting a hand on the porch post like she was greeting an old friend. "This whole street went up almost overnight. Builders made a fortune putting up houses for the boys coming home, and we were lucky enough to get one so close to the water." She mentioned the lemon tree out back, how her husband had planted it the same week they moved in, how he used to slice one open just to smell it before he'd even taste it. She said it like it was still happening. "It's a beautiful home," Socorro said. "We feel very lucky." "Good, good," the woman nodded. "It needs a family. A house like this needs children's laughter, needs life." Socorro, who had left her own mother and sisters behind in Tepic and sometimes went whole days speaking to no one but a 5-year-old, felt a small ache of gratitude for the company. "Would you like to come in? I could make coffee." The woman's smile stayed, but something in her posture went very still. "Oh, I couldn't." "It's no trouble at all, really." "I couldn't," the woman said again, gently, and the subject seemed to close itself. They talked a few minutes more, about the neighborhood, about how it had changed and how it had stayed the same. Then Socorro glanced at her watch. "Oh, I'm sorry. I have so much unpacking to do, and I need to meet my son's bus soon." "You're very kind to talk with an old woman." Socorro went back inside, energized by the encounter. It wasn't until she was back on the step stool that she realized the whole conversation had come and gone without her ever asking the woman's name. It had felt rude to interrupt somehow, and now there was nothing to do but hope she'd see her again. A few days later, the woman appeared once more, standing in the same spot on the walkway. Socorro was hanging curtains in the living room when she saw her through the window. Tony Jr. was on the floor nearby, pushing a toy truck across the rug, and Socorro called to him without thinking. "Stay here a minute. I'm going to say hello to the lady outside." Tony Jr. looked up, then looked past her, out the window, then back at her. "What lady?" "The one on the walkway, mijo, in the flowered dress," Socorro pointed. He squinted at the glass, shrugged the way 5-year-olds shrug at things that don't interest them, and went back to his truck. Socorro told herself he just hadn't been looking in the right spot. She went outside and they talked for a while about the garden, about which roses did best in the Southern California sun. "Tomas will be home soon," the woman said, glancing toward the street. "He likes his dinner at 5 sharp." It was 11 in the morning. "He works so hard," the woman went on, smoothing her dress. "Any minute now, you'll see him coming up the walk." Socorro looked toward the empty street out of politeness and looked back to find the woman watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. She let the comment pass. Older people sometimes get mixed up. A few days after that, the woman was there again when Socorro stepped out to shake a rug over the porch rail. Tony Jr. tore past them across the yard, chasing a ball, bare feet slapping the grass, and the woman watched him go with a soft, faraway look. "My brother used to run just like that," she said. "Marco, back home in Jalisco, barefoot across our yard no matter how many times our mother scolded him." "Marco?" Socorro asked. "The baby of the family." The woman's face went somewhere far away. "He was 7 when the fever took him. I was 9. Her hands went still in her lap. All these years, and I still expect him to come around some corner." Socorro didn't know what to say to that, so she just sat with her a while in silence, the way you do with grief that isn't yours to fix. When she turned to call Tony Jr. in for lunch and looked back toward the walkway, the woman was gone. Socorro looked up and down the street, empty in both directions, and went back inside, telling herself the visit had simply ended the way all the others had. She didn't come back after that. About 2 weeks after they'd moved in, the landlord stopped by. She was a professional-looking woman in her 40s, kind-faced and efficient. "Just checking to make sure everything's working well," she said, glancing around the living room. "Any problems with the plumbing? The heater?" "No, everything's perfect. We love it here." "I'm glad to hear it." The landlord looked around the room a moment longer than the question required. "I'll be honest, the last couple of tenants didn't stick around. There was a single fellow who lasted about 2 months, said the place just didn't sit right with him, and couldn't say why. Before him, a young couple, not married. They were gone in 6 weeks, same story, just said it didn't feel like theirs." She shrugged, like she'd decided a while ago not to chase the reason. Socorro told the landlord she was surprised to hear that, because since the moment she walked into this house, it felt warm and inviting to her. It feels like it's supposed to have people in it. "Actually, a woman came by a few times," Socorro said. "She said she used to own this house, her and her husband. Very sweet. She told me about the lemon tree and about her husband coming home for dinner." The landlord's face went pale. She set down her clipboard. "A woman?" Her voice was careful, controlled. "Yes, late 60s, maybe 70. Silver hair, always in a floral dress. She has an accent, from Jalisco." The landlord sank slowly into a chair. "That could be one of the neighbors," she said, but she didn't sound like she believed it. Half the women on the street fit that description. "She talked about her brother once," Socorro said. "Marco. Said he died of a fever when he was 7. She was 9. The landlord's hand went to her mouth. When she spoke again, her voice had changed entirely. "Nobody knows that name. My mother never told that story to anyone outside the family, not even to me until I was grown. She barely said it out loud. She was quiet for a moment, gathering herself. My parents married in 38, a few years before my father shipped out. He came home in 45, and this was the first house they ever owned, bought from the builder using his GI Bill. I was 5 when we moved in. I still remember the smell of fresh paint and how enormous that backyard seemed. She glanced toward the window, toward the yard. "Does your boy ever play out back? Has he mentioned seeing anyone?" "I called him over once, the day she was on the walkway," Socorro said. "He looked right past her. Asked me what lady. He never saw her at all." "Mrs. Garcia," the landlord said softly. "That can't be my mother. My mother passed away last year, at 68. She'd been in the nursing home up on Oak Street for 2 years, and she cried constantly about wanting to come home. This house, leaving it, nearly broke her heart. All she ever wanted was to come home. She died in that nursing home, crying for this place." Socorro felt her hands go stiff at her sides. "The woman you're describing," the landlord continued, "sounds exactly like my mother. She loved floral dresses. She never lost her accent. And she would stand on that front walkway every evening, watching the street, waiting for my father to come home from work. He passed in 65. She never really stopped waiting." They sat in silence for a long moment. "She was so kind," Socorro said quietly. "She just seemed lonely. She wanted to talk." "She loved this house more than anywhere in the world," the landlord said, wiping her eyes. "I think she just wanted to see who we'd finally have living in it again. Maybe she needed to know it was a family before she could rest." After the landlord left, Socorro stood on the walkway where the woman had always appeared. She looked down at the pavement for a while before she went back inside. For the rest of that week, Socorro found herself at the window every mid-morning anyway, dish towel still in hand, waiting, without quite admitting she was waiting. The walkway stayed empty. She told herself the woman was resting now, wherever she needed to rest, and some mornings she almost believed it. By the second week, she'd stopped setting down whatever she was doing when 11 o'clock came around. The woman never returned. The family stayed in the house 5 years in all. Socorro gave birth to a daughter, Cindy, at the hospital down the road, and brought her home to a nursery that still smelled faintly of fresh paint no matter how many times they repainted it. Tony Jr. grew tall, reaching up every summer to pick lemons off the tree out back, same as the old man once had. Sometimes, when Tony was at work and the children were playing, Socorro would speak aloud to the empty rooms. "Thank you for this home," she would say softly in Spanish. "Thank you for letting us be happy here. We take good care of it, just like you did." She never heard a response. But the house always felt warm then, filled with a peace that seemed to come from the walls themselves, as if somewhere, somehow, an old woman was finally content, knowing that the home she'd loved so dearly was loved again.